Hi, I'm Bob Ethington.
And I'm Nick Nicholas.
And this is From Akron and Beyond. Hi there, folks. It's Bob and Nick. Hi, Nick. How are you?
Hey, perfect today.
Good.
Got some old friends in the studio.
We certainly do. We're very excited about this. It is kind of looking over the history and legacy of a band that really made a lot of noise and a lot of great shows and a lot of great music here in Akron, and that is the Hi-Fis.
A lot of history in the room at the moment.
Exactly. And our guests are Harvey Gold, who was a latecomer to the band. We'll get to that later. And Tren Houseman, also kind of a latecomer to the band, if I'm not mistaken. And original member, Rich Roberts, who you may remember was on an earlier episode of our show when we were talking about Chai Pig. He was the drummer in Chai Pig and the drummer in the Hi-Fis. So hi, Rich. How are you?
I'm well, Bob. Good to be here.
Good. Well, we're excited about doing this because it's just the Hi-Fis are one of these bands that kind of had this legacy, again, as I mentioned, here in town, playing gigs, recording music, doing playing the great songs, which we'll get to the whole history on all that in a second. But I wanted to ask you, I was telling Nick as we were coming in today that the band I was in, Unit 5, we played with your earliest incarnation of the Hi-Fis, right? We played a number of gigs together. And I remember, of course, you being in Chai Pig, and so then there was a gap. So tell us about how it went from you in Chai Pig to you in the Hi-Fis. I mean, you have to go into all the detail. We covered some of the Chai Pig stuff before, but let's hear. Yeah, I'm curious.
Well, when Chai Pig disbanded, I was still in Akron, and I was just picking up, whatever work was around. Because when that band broke up, I thought, well, I'll just play with whomever, wherever, whenever, and see what happens. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't very long before I got a call from Chuck Keith, and I don't know where he got my number. It could have even been from Harvey or Debbie and Sue from Chai Pig. I'm not sure. And he said, I'm putting a band together, and I'd really like you to come out and play with us and see, what works. Mm-hmm. And so I did, and immediately listening to the songs, because Chuck wrote all the songs for the band. I was going to ask that. Yeah. So I went from one original material band, like, oh, here's a fully formed list of songs that are originals, and the guys to play them, except for a drummer.
Okay.
And that was it. I was in.
Yeah.
And what I was told was that Chuck had seen Chai Pig around at the bank and in Kent, and at that point he said, I want that drummer in my band.
Okay. Wow. That's nice to hear, right?
Yeah, it was.
My experiences have usually been more like, do we have to take that drummer? Yeah. I guess he's only went around. Yeah,
that was just around the time that I left the Bizarros, and they went on for like another year afterwards before they broke up. So I didn't get to experience a lot of the those early Hi-Fi shows. I wish I would have been around more for then.
And I remember the shows always being fun. We were like a good pairing, I think, our two bands. I mean, we worked well, complementary in terms of our songs and stuff.
What I do remember, though, was Chuck Keith always had great songs. I remember the old coffee house days, or I remember where I met Harvey, and Chuck was a folk singer, and he did a lot of shows at the old coffee houses, various ones around Akron, and he always wrote great songs. So, speaking of Chuck, and he kind of has this legend of being this great songwriter, which was based on reality. He was a terrific songwriter. Harvey, you go way back with Chuck, right?
I do. Okay. I met Chuck when I was cutting class, and Chuck was doing
his college?
Yes.
Okay.
Chuck was doing his residency at the Student Center
At the Hilltop.
University of Akron.
The Hilltop.
He was never enrolled.
No.
And he and I and a fellow, Chris Reitz, who's this
Yeah.
wonderful finger picker who lives in Michigan now,
Okay.
would like sit around and play. And eventually,
What were you playing? Like folk songs?
stuff I don't remember. This
Okay.
was
But acoustic
114
stuff.
years
Yeah, yeah.
ago. Yeah, it was all acoustic.
Okay.
And people would gather and, hang out, and we'd just be, doing what people did back in 1971. And
Yeah.
eventually, Chuck introduced me to his pal from high school, Denny Coyle, and we formed a band called Willie that also included a friend from school, from college, Wayne Swickley on bass, and Mike Leonard on drums. And we had a band for a little while. Okay. And Nick was mentioning the coffee houses, and we actually did one gig that I can remember at the Avalon, which was Craig Yo's place.
Yeah, down there on Brown Street, Brown and South.
Exactly, right on the corner there. And that was a really cool little band. And then Chuck and I ended up becoming roommates, housemates, and he and I co-wrote a song that Tin Huey recorded called Sister Rose.
That was one of my favorite clone record releases, Sister Rose.
Yes, there's my label boss over on the other side of the studio.
I got to...
Harvey's still looking for those royalties, Nick.
What? No, I'll never forget. I used to pick Chuck up. He didn't have a car, or I don't even think he had a license back then, and taking him to Harvey's house. I don't know if they were living together then or not, but dropping him off, and Chuck had his guitar, and the Heart of Gold was really big then, and I remember by Neil Young, and Chuck pulling out his guitar and rhyming his Jewish, like Liechtenstein and Jungenstein, just looking for a Harvey Gold.
Yeah, great memories.
Where do you remember where you lived? I'm just curious, roughly.
I was over by the university. We had a house on Catherine Place.
That's it.
Okay.
That's where Chuck and actually even before that, we had a house in Firestone Park on Morgan Avenue, right by the expressway.
Wow.
And we destroyed that house, basically.
So those years that we're talking about of Harvey, you being friends with Chuck Keith, are we talking like 1970, 71?
70, 71.
70, 71, because I was 18.
Okay. So your friendship persists through all that, but you end up going on and forming Tin Huey, and we have great episodes on Tin Huey if you guys want to check those out.
That's like 6-7 years later, though.
It is, but I'm assuming...
Well, actually not, Nick.
No, it wouldn't be that long because those guys started playing pretty early.
Oh, when they were kids, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, we may not have gotten our record company to release our record until a couple of years later,
Right.
Nick.
Yeah, okay.
But yes, we were Tin Huey.
Yeah. So telescoping ahead then, let's get back to Rich. And you've been asked then by Chuck to be in the band. There's a wrestling match going on here in the studio, folks. So if I start laughing, that's why. Who were the original members other than you and Chuck of the High Fives?
Chuck Keith, songwriter, lead vocalist. Peter Anthony Bray, known as Tony Bray, was the bass player.
Okay.
And Denny Coyle was lead guitar and second vocalist.
Okay. And so how long did that group stay intact with those members?
Well, that's a good question, Bob. And I'm sure that someone knows the answer. A couple of years is the best I can do on that one.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And did you guys record much at that time?
We recorded at Mark Price's Bushflow Studios.
Okay.
And, of course, the Coffee Break concerts in Cleveland were recorded.
Okay.
We did 2 of those.
Okay. Oh, wow.
And at least one of those is available on YouTube.
Okay, cool. All right.
Both of them? Yeah, both of them are on YouTube.
Okay. Mm-hmm. All right, interesting.
So that is the original. You'll see those 4 people I was talking about in those Coffee Break concerts.
Right, okay, yeah. Okay. So we then have a long gap Am I correct?
Years.
Yes.
So what happens to the original Hi-Fis? Did you guys just break up like a lot of bands do, and because it's just kind of like, this has been fun, but we need to make a living, or what? I mean, I don't want to fill in the blanks here. What was the answer?
Tony Bray, the bass player, decided to move out of state. Mm-hmm. And the Hi-Fis...
As far away as he could get.
Not as far away. He could have gone to California or Singapore.
He's a limited fellow.
And the Hi-Fis, for all the good music and the great camaraderie that we had, were not the best business people. And it just...
Not uncommon in the world of bands.
It just kind of dissolved. With Tony leaving, nobody had the gumption or motivation to, okay, let's find another bass player and make it all happen again. So it just went that way.
Well, I think that's not, an untypical thing. I mean, I think that bands often have kind of an organic quality to them, and it's almost like in Unit 5, we sometimes talk about why did we break up exactly, and I remember having this big meeting at my at my house where we practiced on Mull Avenue, and people were crying and everything, and then it's like later it's kind of like, why did we stop again exactly, what was it? And I can piece together some reasons, but yeah, sometimes it just runs out of steam, right? Or maybe it just is like, if he hadn't left, you'd still be playing all those years.
Maybe. There was no Tom Petty in the band. The kind of person who was like, we're going to go and we're going to do this, and you're going to do it with me, and we're going to, make it. There was nobody to do that.
There's also like the starting over with a new member again, learning, going through all the rehearsals and practices, and then, then what do you got? A couple gigs here and there.
Yeah, right.
Which is the reality for all of us, at different times.
I don't think this is a sensitive question to ask, but I'll ask because I'm going to go ahead and ask it. But Chuck also, he was a very religious guy, right? Like he became very devout in his faith. Did that ever have anything to do with his attitudes about music? Because he can.
That happened during the time that the original Hi-Fis were happening.
Okay.
And I remember that not because he was evangelizing to us about his conversion, but because he floated a new song in rehearsal, which included the words, "the blood of the Lamb."
Okay, yeah.
And we all shook our heads and said, no, we're not doing that. And that's the only song that Chuck ever floated to the band that didn't become something that we performed. But that was a bridge too far for us at that point.
Yeah.
If I could also interject.
Sure.
In the modern Hi-Fis, when I first was drafted into it by Tren, and you'll be talking to him about that, one of the things that was brought up is, hey, we should do that song Harvey and Chuck wrote, Sister Rose.
Yeah.
Now, Sister Rose is a song about an 8-year-old kid who, in parochial school, falls rather passionately, according to the lyrics, in love with the nun who watches over them during recess.
Right.
Chuck would not sing that.
Really?
He was like, I might rewrite the lyrics, but I won't do that. And what he explained to me was that he was always religious, but at the time that we wrote it, he was incredibly pissed off at the Catholic Church.
Okay.
So that was that. And also, I think he brought one song to us as the modern Hi-Fis, at least one, where he actually said, if you're a Christian and you know your Bible, this is a religious song. If you don't, it's a nice song about a girl.
Okay.
And I think that I think Wisdom of This World is also pretty devout when you really think about it, which is on the new album.
Okay. All right. I was just curious about that because
It brings a new light to that song now. You gotta listen to it.
Yeah. And it does, that's the kind of thing. I mean, when, I've known other musicians who, have had conversions to Christianity or to, yoga kind of stuff or whatever. And all of a sudden they don't want to be in bars. They don't want to be around that whole lifestyle, which is, I guess, a conversion to sobriety. Some people like that too. It's like
Chuck had a level of perversion in his DNA, so it held up.
Okay.
He kept it very much under the radar.
Yeah.
It was a personal thing for him.
Yeah. Okay.
Once in a while, if something would come up in the usual band banter that just went too far over the line, he would bring up, well, I can't really go with that, guys.
I just remember he kept it way under the radar, and he just didn't like anybody cussing in front of him when we were younger.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that.
I being in a band with Denny and me, I'm not really sure that applies, Nick.
He might have not liked it, but he couldn't stop it.
No, never.
So, Denny Coyle, who played lead guitar in the band, can you tell me much about his background?
What I know is that he and Chuck met in Cub Scouts.
Wow, okay.
So Cub Scouts is like first grade, second grade, right in there.
Yeah. Second, third.
They went to the same school.
Did they go to Garfield like later on?
Yes.
Garfield, okay.
And that's how they met, and they became friends. And I guess Chuck spent a lot of time at Denny's house.
Okay.
Yeah. Denny's was the place to be.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they grew up. These guys grew up together.
And were they playing music together?
Well, Denny played in. He basically made a living his almost entire life playing in cover bands, but really, really, really good cover bands. And I remember how I used to sort of think privately before I played with him. I thought, well, you're not playing in an original band, so that's not as good. Except he learned how to play guitar like everybody. And when we started playing in Willie, and definitely in the hi-fis, when a particular style of song came up, because we had a lot of different styles in the context of the hi-fis. I mean, it was pop, but it was...
Yeah.
He would have this like absolutely balls out, picture perfect guitar part for it because he'd learned at the feet of everybody.
Right.
And then he just went beyond it. So it was kind of interesting that his history was playing, at places like the Draft House and, places where people were expecting to hear either hits or FM hits and their favorites. And he just killed it.
Right. He had the technique to be able to play all that kind of
stuff.
stuff.
He was amazing.
And he was a great singer, too. So he brought a lot to the stage in those bands. He was probably making real money, a living when Chuck was, playing for nothing at Akron U.
Like $5 at the coffee house.
And Denny was adorable back then.
Oh, yeah.
It was like having a version of Paul McCartney in your band.
Yeah. Hey, Harvey, remember... he lived with Paul Hively for a while, and that's another name from the past. We're going to try to do a show on him at some point. Just two old school, hardworking guitar players. Denny Coyle, and you were in classical guitar with Paul Hively.
Well, Paul Hively and Terry Walker from your band and I all gave guitar lessons for working for Jim and Jim Kalal.
Yeah, there
was the
Akron.
classical teacher at Akron U.
Right.
We were the guys who knew what a flat pick was.
So the original hi-fis, the bass player leaves and things kind of grind to a halt. And in that period of time, just roughly, were you still doing music on a regular basis, Rich, with anybody, or were you kind of not doing music for a while?
After that, I needed to make money.
Yeah, it's been known to happen. Yeah.
So I spent time in like a top 40 cover band traveling, like Holiday Inn circuit.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I didn't know that. That's
No,
interesting.
that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I did that for a couple years, and then I got sick of being. I had a son then, and I was like, I didn't have a son to like be gone for 2/3 of the year.
Right.
And so I decided I'd stay here and just work, locally and get the day job I never intended to get.
Right.
That happens to all of us.
Right. Right. Yeah. So the original hi-fis breaks up in 1982. Okay. Is it? Wow.
You're getting prompted by Tren, who is the Akron music sound historian in the room right now.
Okay. All right. Because I would have thought it was a year later. So
I want to say 83.
Yeah, because you got 5 ended in 82.
It drives me crazy that you see all these posters and they never put the year on it.
Yeah,
It's
never.
March 12th.
None of them. I've got all these great Tin Huey posters, and I have no idea what year we did the gig.
there's a reason why. It was because it was of the moment, and it was like half of them don't even have a date. It's just Friday. It's this coming Friday. That's when the gig's going to be.
We know why.
It's only when
we just don't like it.
Because we're old now. We're trying to figure out when this stuff happens.
We can't remember anything. It could be evidentiary.
Yeah, no, but I agree with you.
But speaking of posters, that was one of the great fun things about the hi-fis was that Chuck was a visual artist as well, a graphic artist, and also Alan Bukoff was a great friend of the band.
Alan,
and we had really good posters for the shows. There was one that was Bumorama, which, if you can imagine the visuals for that, which were very grainy, etc. And then there was the hi-fis, the all-priest band.
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yeah.
So, there's Unifive Hi-Fi's joint gig flyers that I have seen, and they're all great. Yeah, and I'm sure that he did those. Yeah.
And Bukoff went on to do graphics for the waitresses, for Tin Huey,
yeah, Unifive
for
too.
half
Yeah,
Cleveland.
a lot of people.
He just went off to Michigan and sat in this little dark room and came up with all this twisted stuff.
Yeah.
Those great little badges he'd make, remember?
Yeah.
In little envelopes.
You want to buy some?
I got some of those.
I have some of them too.
So we're going to say the band ended at that point, Mach 1 or however we're going to call it, in 83. Okay. And so there is now a gap of time, whatever year it is. I'm saying 83. And so when does the idea happen to reform the band?
And how did that happen?
Did he do it?
Well, over the many years after that, I would get a call from Chuck occasionally.
30 years later?
He worked for the MRDD board in Akron, and he would do like Christmas shows for the clients in that organization. And so he would call me, Denny, other players, and Mike Lenz, different guys to do these shows. And then there was a band called the Paper Crowns that was with Judy and Bob Bassone on bass and George Cabanis on guitar.
Okay, yeah,
and
I remember now.
That band had a little bit of an impact for not real long, but a while. And again, it was Chuck material and some of George Cabanis's material too.
Okay.
And then more years go by. And I think Tren and Harvey know more about this because they were the ones that got the calls and did the work to get the band back together.
So this was definitely Tren's insidious doing.
Okay, so on that note, this is From Akron and Beyond. I'm Bob Ethington with Nick Nicholas, and we are talking about the legacy of the Akron band, the Hi-Fis, with Harvey Gold, Rich Roberts, and now... late but not to be forgotten, Tren Houseman, who I was trying to figure out exactly when to bring you in, Tren. Okay. This seems like exactly the right point.
Exactly
and
the right
so,
point, yes.
Okay. So, because everyone else doesn't seem to have any idea how you guys ever reformed. So what happened? And
Interesting.
When? And when
it was,
this?
gosh, it must have been 2000, after the 2000s, 2001, 2002. This is a strange story. I owned an advertising agency, and I was doing a new client pitch. And I looked down the end of the conference table, and there's a girl, well, woman now at this point, that I recognize. And after the meeting, I said, "Hey, didn't you used to be married to Rich Roberts?" And she said, "Yes, I still am." So I said, is he still playing? Because I was in a band called VHF, and we opened for Unit 5,
Yeah, right.
and we opened for the Hi-Fis, and we opened for Hammer Damage, and we were all still in touch, even as the 2000s rolled around. And I said, is Rich still playing? Because I just love the Hi-Fis. And she said, well, yeah, occasionally. And I said, well, here's my number. Have him give me a call, and we'll see if we can do something together. And then all of a sudden, Chuck caught wind of the thing, and he started showing up. And Denny, of course, they were a package deal. Chuck and Denny were sort of the guys you wanted in the band because they knew each other's licks like you would not believe. They could finish each other's sentences.
Right.
So we started doing some old Hi-Fi's material in the basement, and I said, boy, it sure would be fun if we could get Harvey Gold to play in the band.
What possibly came over you to think that?
So, yeah, I don't know why. I don't know why we thought that. But so I go out to lunch with Harvey. He had just come back from New York, I believe, right?
Well, the timeline really is that I'd been back from New York for a while, and I was actually playing in Half Cleveland with you, Bob.
Yeah.
And Tren just started approaching me right before we started winding down with Half Cleveland, and really annoyed the hell out of me. I didn't really want to do it, but because I knew that Chuck had a reputation for being a little bit of an agoraphobe, I challenged Tren. I didn't know that he already had this in his pocket. He gave nothing away. And he goes, I said, if you can get Chuck to leave his house, I'll show up. And he was like, oh, okay.
He's
well,
at
they
my
were
house
already
now.
scheduling practices.
Oh, that's great.
All right, take it.
Yeah, so Chuck was a bit of an agoraphobe, and he was not really interested in playing out all that much. So we got kind of a slow start. It was a couple of years of basement dwelling before we finally got out on a stage. But we had one of the greatest people in Akron, Jill Bacon Madden, who's was behind us and always booked a once-a-month gig after we got going. And that was just a godsend for us because it became like a little living room for us to play original songs because you just can't go into every bar and play original songs.
Well, that was great. So, we had the pleasure of playing with you all a lot of those shows, the Bizarros and the Hi-Fis.
Yeah.
You know?
Backtracking a little bit. I was playing with George Cabanis in Bad Dudes.
Oh, that's right.
About that time with the Bizarros, we had sort of a standing duopoly of gigs with the Bizarros, and so I mean that era of Akron music everybody is very tight knit, and even 40, 50 years later, we're still seeing each other and talking to each other. And, I have a friend who lives in Texas, and he said all musical roads lead back to Akron because he'll be in Dallas and he'll talk about Devo. And then all of a sudden, somebody knows somebody in the High Plains Drifters or the Dead Boys. It's an amazing community of people who still care about what they're doing, and it never was a moneymaker, but you just got to love it. So,
had Chuck been writing songs all those years?
That was kind of the funny thing. We used to practice, or we still practice when we get together over at my place, and I swear he would bring in 3 songs a month of that, we would work on. He was just such a prolific guy. Yeah. I mean, and they would all be good. There were like no clunkers, Yeah. But he really came in with ideas and structure, and we just kind of fleshed it out, you
Yeah.
know, and maybe an arrangement here or there.
Yeah.
But incredible songwriter, one of the best I've ever known. Period.
So what? I'm sorry to keep asking you guys to pin down dates, but like, what would you consider to be like the first
2.0
official hi-fi's gig of the second version of the?
Probably around. It had to be around 2010 because I went back to school and got an MBA, and I remember it was after that I graduated in 2010. So it was somewhere in the early 2010s.
Okay. And did that band play basically songs that had been written for that group, or did you guys ever play any of the earlier stuff?
Oh no, we had plenty of old stuff.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought you did, but
there were some that you just couldn't pass up. You know, like "Can't Let Go" or you know, "Kissing My Baby." There and going back to the prowess of Denny Coyle to be able to pick up any guitar style. I know the Summit plays a Christmas song that we just kind of one-offed in my basement called "Christmas Time Is Coming Around Again," and there is a Dwayne Eddy solo by Denny Coyle in the middle that is. I just sat there and my jaw dropped. How great it was! Just right on the money, perfect. You know, and I mean, it's not screaming guitar solo stuff. It's like real Dwayne Eddy stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wanted to interject a little bit of Denny Coyle.
And while we're important, while we're interjecting Denny, which sounds like an odd thing to say, I was going to say that he was such a nice guy, such a sweet guy. Man. I mean, like notably nice.
Oh yeah,
and you know, it was amazing. And of course, listeners to the show who know who we're talking about and are familiar with the hi-fis know the whole story. Those of you who have not are not familiar for whatever reason with the band will not be aware of the, I don't know how other to put it, Nick, the sort of tragic thing that happened to the band. I guess I'm gonna. I mean,
we'll leave it up to them to tell us.
Yeah. I think Harvey was sort of the hub of what was going on at that time with several. Well, Denny had always had a few health problems, but Chuck came as a super surprise. So
okay.
Well, before I joined these guys, you know, and the thing is that they had actually started doing a little something before I came in, because there was another keyboard player who sat with them,
Joe Bendo,
who I owe at least a couple of my piano parts that have shown up on hi-fi's recordings too, because he was wonderful and a very sweet guy. But Denny had, when I joined up, Denny was still in recovery from his second bout of lymphoma, I believe.
Okay. Wow.
And then this is like, you know, it's like, listen, I had lunch with a friend of mine not too long ago who's like one of my oldest friends I went to school with. And as I approached the table at lunch, he said, "Okay, here's the rule. We're only going to talk about health for 5 minutes." And I thought that was great. And so we immediately sat down, got coffee, and put in a solid 20 to 35 minutes on health. So, you know, and I thought that was pretty truncated. I didn't even talk about my back. Anyway, you know, there was a history of health issues. Chuck had had a stroke years before when I was in New York. And he had also had lymphoma.
Really?
That he had gone through treatment on and had been in remission for years and years and years. Denny was, so basically what happened to us, I guess you want to, cutting to the chase, Chuck was fine. Chuck had lost a lot of weight. Chuck was eating better. He was doing great. And Denny was not.
Right.
Denny picked up lymphoma for a third time and was having just a really, and understandably, a really hard time with the chemo.
Right.
And it was really debilitating. And one of the things that happens when you're in chemo is that it takes away your immune system. So you can get other things that are happening.
Right.
And that then meant that he couldn't he had to go off his chemo for a while, and everything just sort of piled up on him.
Yeah.
And so he was in the hospital. But the thing is that Denny would like start crashing, but we had a gig. So, I mean, I don't know that he ever really did it, but if we wanted to make it legend, it's like, oh, well, Denny signed himself out of the hospital yesterday so we could go be there for the gig.
Yeah.
And so we never.
So some of those later hi-fi shows, like he would have to sit.
Oh yeah,
stuff. Right. Yeah.
We never counted him out because he was Denny and he was nuts and he was very much a showbiz creature. So the show must go on.
Right. Yeah.
At any rate, what happened was I had been out of town for a month. This was in October of 2023. We had a gig booked for November, and we were, saying, well, Denny's having some problems and he's in and out of the hospital, but the rest of us should get together and practice because we don't really know.
Yeah, right.
And Denny could easily walk in cold. We could have 3 new songs and he would plug his guitar in and kill it.
Yeah, right.
But at any rate, we had scheduled a rehearsal for Saturday, and Chuck notified us on Friday that he and his wife Janie had not been feeling well that week, and he didn't really want to pass anything along to any of us.
Right.
So he suggested that we forego Saturday. And Saturday morning, early, I got a call from Denny's daughter Erin, starting out going, Dad's okay.
Yeah.
She wasn't.
Right.
But I'm calling you to tell you that Chuck died. And
Jeez.
he sort of, the crass way of putting it is he sort of woke up dead, in bed that morning.
Yeah.
And the thing is, Denny is in the hospital at this point.
Right.
Denny has already gone into the hospital because of the lymphoma.
He had lymphoma. He had an infection in his foot. He had all this stuff. And so Denny actually had become semi-conscious. He never had to learn that his best friend was dead. And like 2 days later, Denny passed.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, but
Amazing.
the moment, I mean, I think that we all knew that if Denny was going to be gone, it was probably a good chance that we would all sit down and talk and decide that the Hi-Fis was kind of done.
Yeah.
I can't say that for sure, but I think it was going in that direction. But ultimately, when Chuck died, the moment he died was the moment that the Hi-Fis evaporated.
Sure. Right.
This is a song called A Picture of You and Me. It's an old man song thinking about a time when my lovely wife and I were younger. It was taken on a snowy day.
Well, yeah, I didn't know Chuck that well, but I knew Denny some. And, the thing I always remember about him, and you guys will know what I'm talking about, is that I would see him and he was in terrible shape.
Yeah.
He could barely walk, and he would, be moving really slow and just didn't look good. And all he would do is ask me how I was doing.
Yeah.
It was like, how and it wasn't like he was in denial. He'd be like, oh, things aren't going that good.
He really
but then
cared.
He really cared about other people.
He's a great guy.
It was just, it was remarkable. Yeah. And so sad. And such let's face it. It's, I don't mean to make this in any way sound like a flip comment, but it's like, what a way for a band to end.
Yeah.
Well, that's true.
For, kind of the 2 main guys to die who were best friends in the same 2 days, 3 days apart. That's crazy.
One of the things that's really telling about this to me is, aside from my personal relationship as a musician with the band, where it gave me the opportunity to simply try to become a better piano player and arranger, which was wonderful after a lifetime of being essentially a utility infielder, playing piano, guitar, lead singing, writing,
Right.
One of the things that Chuck always talked about, and this goes back to the idea of him not caring about playing out that much, to him, probably the most important thing about the Hi-Fis was and in his words, the social component.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we were all really close,
Yeah,
and we all cared about each other a lot.
Right.
And we'd all known each other for many, many, many years. I mean, by the time it ended, I'd even known Tren for many years,
Yeah,
which is
right,
kind of
right.
weird. But so having, two of my friends who had been pals for like 50 plus years
Yeah.
die within 3 days of each other, 2 days of each other
Right.
and have this band that was probably my favorite experience playing with a band of people for a whole lot of reasons,
Yeah.
musically and otherwise, evaporate like that.
Yeah,
and that's
right.
the word I use because it was like
It's gone.
you didn't even have time to blink.
Yeah. Just,
Was a trauma that I think we're still processing.
sure. Yeah.
So, what Tren wanted me to mention, because it's sort of touting what we've been doing since then, is that we knowing that Denny was sick, knowing that any gig that we played, based on the actuarial charts of how old we were, could be our last.
Right.
The gig that we played in August, on August 17th, I believe it was, which was always streamed video-wise, we got it recorded on Pro Tools, which is, multi-tracking, so we could take
Right.
it into the studio. And part of our processing for Tren, it was, for the most part, working with the video.
Right.
For myself, to a great degree, and Rich really came in and helped a lot, was the actual mixing in the studio of it.
Right.
Virtually no substitutes. I mean, we couldn't get Denny to redo a guitar part. We couldn't get Chuck to re-sing something.
Right.
It was a pretty pristine performance, which shocked me because I was having fun. But you know what it's like to be in a band, you guys. You hear what you hear based on where you're standing on the stage, what you want in your monitors.
Yeah, right.
You don't really know how your band sounds.
Not
Right,
really.
right.
And I'm sitting there stunned. And I'm like, crap. This is like the best band ever. It was like all of a sudden I realized I did start getting this notion as we were getting towards the end that it might have felt like it would have been if I had been allowed to sit in with a band like Little Feat or something. And at any rate, we mixed down 13 songs from that show. We had another 4 that we had mixed down with Tren and his son Duncan and I had mixed from a gig that we did in February of that year, 2 of which Jack Kidney had sat in with us. Jack from the Numbers Band played harp on one and I think sax on the other. Maybe just harp. I don't know. I only produced the album. I have no idea what's on it. And we've released the album, and it's based on one of Chuck's song titles. And actually, the title of this album goes to Jill Madden, who said, why don't you call it Can't Let Go? So it's called Can't Let Go, The Last Hi-Fi Show.
It's a great CD.
Yeah.
Thank you. And it really is. It's like Austin City Limits kind of quality. And we Tren sunk it back up with the video that we had streamed that night.
Okay.
And we had an event at Jill's where he had dug up some video from the old Hi-Fi's coffee break concert.
And the bank.
And then we showed it. This was all to raise money for Chuck's widow.
Okay.
That's Janie, and I only mention that because one of the jokes in the Hi-Fis was that at least half the songs Chuck ever wrote were about Janie.
Okay.
And that really pissed off the other girlfriends and wives.
That's great.
So we've got the album, and Tren is going to, I'm looking at him right now, he is going to cut that video that we showed into individual pieces so that people can actually watch them and download them and do what they want with them up on YouTube as we go. 4 of them are up now, but none of the new ones yet.
Okay.
Right? Good boy.
Well, yeah, I always wondered about how that happened, that show was recorded. I mean, because it is a
That well,
terrific show.
yeah.
And it's not, like Nick says, the recording's great. I'm like, well, boy, that was lucky.
Yeah, that's what I thought until just now.
And recorded such a solid show and so well done. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's good to know
The two
too.
times that I was able to actually hear what this band sounded like, it's like Harvey was saying, you're on stage and there's all this noise. I'm sitting behind a drum set with all these cymbals and stuff. And the first time I could really hear the band was during COVID, after COVID, when Jill reopened and we had these dividers, clear plexiglass dividers between all the band members. So I'm in this booth with a big floor monitor. It's like, oh, now I can actually hear everybody in the band.
Yeah.
And the other was when we mixed that live show.
Yeah.
And you can hear all the lyrics so well, which Chuck's lyrics are fabulous.
Yeah.
And that was often just really hard to hear on stage.
And I sat across the stage always from Denny. So there were times that we'd be mixing and it'd be like, oh, Jesus, turn that up. It's like, what a solo, know, or just a lot of what Denny did. I know we're talking about Denny a lot, but the fact is that he would play so many really, really creatively good things and figures inside of a song. It wasn't just guitar solos.
Right.
He really helped bring color to these songs.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Chuck, he had his guitar parts down. He would do the same guitar part, like structure, everything about it.
Right.
So Denny, as a truly great all-around guitar player, could fit in spaces in there and weave in and out all kinds of really good things.
Right.
And so it was very improvisational in the moment for him.
Right.
I was just going to say it was wonderful, the community support that was there. The last Hi-Fi show, the turnout was amazing, and it was really moving, and get back to the when the passing of the two guys, the events, for Chuck and the show of love, all the people that came, but Denny's, his daughter, Erin, what she put together for him, remembrance for him at that event center. It was just all Akron history, all the various type of bands that Denny was in. Everybody was there. It was a couple hundred people probably.
It was interesting because Denny's memorial service, the gig we did to raise money, Tracy Thomas's show last week at Leathervane. Honestly, all of those qualified as I turned to somebody in the lobby at one point and they said, isn't it really interesting that we're here with everyone that we've ever known ever? It was really quite the community.
Yeah. It's important, man. Everybody gave a shit about each other,
Yeah. And another Denny Coyle factoid, in the original Hi-Fis, now we're talking like 1982, Denny Coyle is already wearing hearing aids,
really,
and can hardly hear.
No,
yes. Yeah. In 1982, the original band, the guy is very, very hearing challenged,
right,
all the way back then, and he, nothing would stop the guy.
Yeah.
Sometimes he would get a little tired of us going on about things at rehearsal, and he's just sitting there
waiting.
He can't hear, and he just, his head would hang down, and he would just try to wait it out. And finally, he'd say, "For God's sake, could we just play?"
Now that is something I wanted to mention a little while ago, but I thought maybe prudence was,
it's all coming out, Harvey.
Had some valor to it, but talking about what a wonderful guy Denny was, yes, he was a wonderful guy. On the other hand, in those last years, he was a dear friend. He was a wonderful guy. He passed away before we could do our special date, which was me going over to his house with Swenson's and spending the day watching David Cronenberg films. But he was a darling man underneath a patina of massive irascibility because his hearing aid had gone wonky on him, so it would be hanging from his ear, and he's like, I can't hear a damn thing except his whistling.
Well, Tren is sort of the historian of the band, I guess. I still want to just nail down for my own information. So there is the CD of this last show, Can't Let Go. Were there recordings? I mean, I know you said about coffee break concerts and stuff, but did the Hi-Fis actually put out any 45s or anything from that original band?
Well, as I have recordings of them,
Right.
Just because I've kind of traded for them for
Yeah.
other purposes. But the Bushflow thing with Mark Price at the board was a 6-song EP, right?
Was it?
Yeah. Let me remind you. And he might be able to tell you more. This is Rich.
No, he cannot tell you. I honestly do not recall that getting pressed.
Yeah, I don't remember that either.
I don't
See, it
think.
seems funny to me that there isn't something,
'Cause I've
but
never
I can't remember ever seeing it.
No,
So
I don't think. I don't think we
it
ever actually got to the point of pressing because Nicholas, you didn't call us up and say, "Come on, guys, we got to press."
I'd
Just kidding, Nick.
I'd retired.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's unfortunate, but the tapes are out there.
Oh, yeah.
There's
Yeah.
recordings. Yeah, yeah.
And I think
Yeah,
it's. Am I correct in saying that you guys stand by the legacy of the Can't Let Go recording?
Oh,
that is a good
absolutely.
fitting representation of the band.
Oh,
Yes.
I think we're all extremely grateful.
I always ask this
for-
question: where can you purchase that or get it?
Well, at this point, I did something through DistroKid, so it can be streamed
what?
in DistroKid, which allows it to go to all the streamers. So you can Apple Music. What's the one that nobody wants to?
Spotify.
Spotify. Everybody wants to boycott, but we have it up on Bandcamp, along with an EP that we recorded actually. Like a studio recording of 6 songs, and it's called the Hi-Fi 6x5.
Okay.
And our Christmas tune
Yeah.
that we really did. Chuck brought it in. I think we practiced it for about 40 minutes and then started recording and then just took it into Jeff Koval's to mix it. And it was a spectacular moment in history.
Right.
But really, mostly Bandcamp. You can order hard copies of the
Oh,
CDs,
so I was gonna ask, yeah.
and you can download them. Yeah, and at this point, Janie has been wonderful. I haven't told these guys, but when I sent her last check, because we've had whatever we have sold of the live album. Has just gone directly to Jane. Whatever money we put into making it, that was kind of our contribution, on behalf of Chuck.
Right.
But her last note to me was like, wow, thanks. From now on, you guys should get the money. You worked hard for it. But I think we're probably going to still send money to
Yeah.
Janie.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's nice.
We
That's
love
just nice.
Janie.
Yeah.
She's a good girl, and she inspired one
Yeah.
ridiculous basket full of songs.
You've been so kind to us. Thank you for listening.
So, I guess I can give you a real short timeline as from the bass player's perspective.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. They count.
Because
I guess.
I was
yeah.
sort of an innocent bystander for the Hi-Fi's first incarnation down at JB's and the bank, and occasionally a Cleveland gig here or there at the pop shop and whatnot. But I loved the Hi-Fis. They were just a fantastic band, and I became friends with the bass player in the Hi-Fis because we were opening for them at Tony Bray. Mm-hmm. And Tony's legacy was not only that he buy my bass amp from me, thank God, because it was too big to move around, but he looked like Michael Stanley. So Chuck used to call him Tony Stanley when you introduced him on stage, and that was kind of like Chuck humor. But and then as the band started to get back together, Bob Bassone was playing bass for a few gigs, like at Tangiers.
Okay.
There was always that Thanksgiving or holiday thing. I think it may have been a Hammer Damage reunion that the Hi-Fis actually opened up.
Okay.
And I'm sitting with Tony Bray at the circular bar right next to the stage at Tangiers. And I asked him, I said, "You want to play in this band again?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Okay, well, I may try later." So Tony and I, we're always good friends.
Yeah.
So, and Bob and I have always been friends, even way back in the Little Nicks, Johnny Clampett and the Walkers days. So, everybody. I happened to mention at the memorial that there was Jack Trowbridge from Color Me Gone, and there was Bob Bassone sitting there, and then there was Parkins from your band, and I said, "Well, you could drop a bomb right here and wipe out all the Akron bass players."
Yeah.
But later on, I think there was no competitiveness or anything.
Right.
It was
No.
just whatever made the band sound better. Was great. I mean, anybody.
And Color Me Gone covered.
Oh, and Color Me Gone did record for A&M Records, and they recorded one of Chuck's songs with Marty Jones called "Hurtin' You."
Was that on that EP they did?
Yeah, that was on the Color Me Gone EP
Wow.
from I think that was 84, 85.
Yeah.
And there's a version of that's on our live album.
Right. Yes.
And when we did that, when we had that event where we showed the video with all the remixed audio, the three of us decided to play 4 songs, and Jack Kidney joined us on all of them because he had gotten to a point sitting in with this band where there was this one song that we did, "The Moon Came Down." Chuck just said, "Yeah, I don't ever want to play it again unless Jack's playing with us." So Jack played with us, and we got Tracy Thomas to sing "Hurtin' You," which went off really very well.
It was great.
Yeah. So before we wrap this up, I'm just curious. So Tren, are you doing music now?
Not at the precise moment. No, I mean, I'm still noodling around with the home studio and whatnot. But at that period of time, I was in like 5 bands, so I kind of taking a little breather. I was in the Record Party and Bad Dudes and a few other bands at that time. So, including the Hi-Fis. So I kind of backed away for just a little while. Of course, my dad passed away too. So
Right.
something to think about. So,
Right.
Anyway,
And then Harvey, I know you're doing some music stuff. What are you up to?
Well, Bob, are you that curious since you're the drummer? Well, we've got a band called Golems of the Red Planet, which is described as a band doing, wait, I have to hit Tren, doing, what do we call it, third wave surf versions of John Zorn's Masada, which is a ridiculous description. But
Rolls off the tongue.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It's bass, drums, guitar, and cello. And we just finished our 10th and what we consider to be closing song of our first album, and we're talking to some people about putting it out as an album. And other than that, I acquired a 1929 Mason and Hanlon parlor grand piano, and I do walkabouts on it every night for me. Sometimes I end up hearing a little tittering and applause behind me.
Where did you
from
put that
Dolly.
in your house?
You can come over and visit me, Nick.
Yeah.
You don't live far. You can come see it.
call first.
Yeah.
And
I'm busy.
and I'm not going to.
You got that in.
Nobody's answering the door, Jen. And both cars are in the driveway. Yeah, we thought it was Terry Hine coming over, so we hid. At any rate, and the only other thing that I would say about plans going forth, other than just me having musical ideas that I might record and do, is I had a very short conversation with Jack Kidney about it, but I was really intrigued by what we did as a quartet that night. I don't want to try
As the Hi-Fis.
Yeah, I didn't want to pretend that we were the Hi-Fis, though.
Right.
And we weren't. We were the 4 of us and the 5 of us with Tracy singing that one song.
Yeah.
We were doing the songs of Chuck Keith.
Yeah.
But I'm intrigued by that band. It sounded really good.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, I play piano and I play guitar, and Jack plays sax, harp, piano, and guitar.
Right.
And percussion.
And percussion. Yeah. Somebody let him buy a set of timbales. And so, we haven't really had any conversations to that, but it's been in the back of my head.
Okay, that'd be interesting. And then, Rich, how about you? What are you up to?
Well, when the hi-fis disappeared,
Yes.
evaporated essentially overnight, that was pretty rough on all three of us,
Sure.
me included. And I thought, okay, what do I do with this thing? And I play guitar too.
Oh.
And I'd been writing for a few years, not a lot, but some on guitar, all instrumental. And I thought, well, maybe I should just dig into what I'm doing and my thing. So that's what I did, and that's what I'm still doing. I've got a group of folks that get together. I've got a studio at home, and I have guys over every week, and we play all kinds of everything stuff, including some of my stuff. And
are you playing guitar mainly?
I'm playing. Yeah, I play guitar. I play guitar with that.
Okay.
And so I started singing, which I hadn't sung. I'm not a person who goes around singing like some people do, And I was actually a singer in the very first band I was in when I was like 13. It was like, somebody's got to sing. Okay, I'll do it. And I sang in all the bands. I sang backups later on. But I hadn't exercised my voice in years. So I started taking vocal lessons just fairly recently because I started writing lyrics and having getting them out there with songs on guitar and done some open mics. So I'm just pursuing that and seeing, what I can do with that. And it's fun. It's great taking vocal lessons and kind of rebuilding that.
Well, I salute you on that.
Yeah,
it sounds like, you this whole thing was, as we've said, tragic and put you in kind of a dark place, but you're coming out of it with some new vigor. It sounds like that's good. That's good.
I
exploring
just
stuff you might not have done otherwise, right?
Yeah, it's a motivation to what am I going to do? Well, I might as well just put on my big boy pants and do this stuff and get out in front of people.
Yeah.
I just watched Respect, the movie about Aretha Franklin, and she got advice in the movie. She gets advice from the guy who taught her piano. He said, music will save your life. Because she went through her dark spots.
Yeah,
and
right.
Music will save your life.
Yeah.
And it will.
Yeah.
Folks.
Well, on that note, no pun intended, I can't top that. So Rich Roberts and Tren Houseman, Harvey Gold, all here talking about the band The Hi-Fis. And you should definitely check them out online or get their album. Nick and I both heartily endorse it, correct?
Big time,
yes. So this has been From Akron and Beyond, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.
Sigh.